Hello and welcome to the Acceleration Roadmap webinar for educators. We are so grateful that you were able to carve out some time today to join us for this webinar. Before we get into our material, we would like to take a moment to introduce ourselves. My name is Margaret Bruce, and I'm a Senior Manager of Academics and ELA here at Tntp. I've been a classroom teacher, a coach, school leader, and I'm really looking forward to joining you on this journey with the roadmap today. I'll turn it over to my colleague Tabitha now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tabitha Hammond. I'm a Director of Consulting here at Tntp. I've also been a teacher, a school leader, and I'm really excited to be working with you all on the Learning Acceleration Project this year. So thank you so much for joining us, and let's jump in. Before we get started with the content of this webinar, we wanted to point out 3 resources you should have handy while we go through this. So go ahead and pause this presentation so you can pull up these links. The first is the actual acceleration roadmap on the DESE website. You're going to want to have that up for the duration of the webinar. The second thing is linked within the acceleration roadmap. So you can find the calendar tool right inside of that document. And lastly is the educator self-assessment. You're going to want to have this open for later on in the session. So go ahead and pause us now and pull up those resources.
Welcome back. We hope that you were able to get those resources handy. And before we get into the heart of the matter, we would like to introduce you to our organization. As I mentioned, we work for a national nonprofit called Tntp. Tntp was founded in 1997 by teachers who believed that all students deserved great teaching, with a particular focus on equity for students who have not been served well by the current educational system. Today, our work focuses on 3 primary areas: rigorous academics, talented people, and supportive environments. We offer a range of support from strategic advice to multi-year plans with school districts, charter networks, and state departments of education across the US. Tntp and DESE have partnered on several initiatives, including teacher diversification and deeper learning. Today, we're here to talk about the acceleration roadmap for educators. To develop these roadmaps, we heard from educators, school and district leaders, students, families, and community members across the Commonwealth. The insights and perspectives that these stakeholders shared with us really laid the groundwork for developing these roadmaps, as well as the learning experiences that we'll be offering throughout this summer. DESE and Tntp closely collaborated to ensure that these roadmaps are aligned with the unique needs of students across Massachusetts. And we're really intentional about utilizing the tools already existing and the resources that are currently provided by DESE. So speaking of learning experiences coming up this summer, today we're in the webinar, which is the introduction to the roadmap. During our time together today, the first part will really be about understanding the research, the data, and the premise for learning acceleration, as well as an overview of the roadmap. Then we'll really get into all of the nuances and resources that the roadmap offers us as educators. Over the summer, we're really excited to also offer these 4 additional professional learning experiences, which you can see here on this slide. You can sign up for any of these learning experiences in the roadmap. There is a link that you can use to sign up and join us live in Zoom for these sessions. We'll also be offering office hours in which you can come and bring your unique questions that we will be happy to answer and support you with moving forward. Please also note that certain school leaders and schools may be providing additional incentives for you to attend these professional learning experiences. So definitely check in with your administration if that's something that's offered in your district. We would love to see you there. And so our learning objectives for today, you can pause here and take the next 30 seconds to read through our objectives. So as I mentioned, in the first portion of our time together, we'll really be building knowledge and a shared understanding of what learning acceleration truly is and why the research indicates we should take this approach, especially at this point in time. And the rest of our time will be spent really unpacking the roadmap and brainstorming your plans for the upcoming school year.
Let's jump into our first objective. So why are we accelerating student learning rather than remediating student learning? Take a moment now and consider what you already might know about accelerated learning. As you read in the pre-work, acceleration is not about going through the curriculum at a faster pace. It's more about providing students just-in-time supports that will allow them to access the grade level content in the classroom. And so, in other words, if a student hasn't mastered the earlier skills that are required to complete a grade appropriate assignment, the student receives just-in-time support, giving the student just the right amount of help to move forward on that assignment right when they need that help through scaffolds and also through coordinated interventions. And on the other hand, we have remediation. Remediation is putting students in below grade level content to fill in all of their previous gaps. The typical approach to remediation is providing students work that's better suited for earlier grades. And this approach doesn't really come close to catching students up, and it likely will compound the problem. In a recent study TNTP did called the opportunity myth, we found that this approach of remediation, it's really well-intentioned, but it practically guarantees that students will lose even more academic ground. And it also reinforces this misguided belief that some students can't do grade level work. There are students stuck in this vicious cycle, and they're disproportionately the most vulnerable students. Students of color, students from low-income families, students with special needs or learning and thinking differences, for example. And so with remediation, these specific groups of students often don't even get the opportunity to access grade level content that would support them finishing up their unfinished learning and staying on grade level. So in other words, doubling down on current strategies for catching these students up is only going to widen these opportunity and achievement gaps. So we all need to be ready on the first day back with a fundamentally different strategy for diagnosing unfinished learning and preparing students to access grade level learning. So let's just go ahead and unpack this concept a bit more by looking at what we've learned from the study opportunity myth. So the opportunity myth study was conducted well before COVID. Even before school closures, we know that students often didn't have access to grade level assignments. When we did the research in the opportunity myth, we looked at more than 5,000 assignments and 20,000 pieces of individual student work across 5 diverse districts across the country. What we saw is that students often didn't have access to grade level assignments. And in fact, only about a quarter of assignments that kids got gave them the chance to meet the demands of the standards in their grade. And so this is kind of easier to understand when you look at contrasting examples of content that students experience. So we're going to look at 2 ELA assignments. Don't worry about being able to read this slide. I'm going to describe it to you. It's just a brief overview. So in one 8th grade classroom on the left-hand side, the students were reading A Mighty Long Way. It was part of their district adopted expeditionary learning materials. And their assignment was to write an informational essay analyzing the ways that the press affected the events in Little Rock. This allowed students to really fully meet the depth of multiple 8th grade standards while also building their knowledge of the world in this really meaningful way. And then by contrast, in another 8th grade classroom in that very same district, students were reading a 5th grade level text called Penguins at Risk. And then they completed multiple choice vocabulary questions and filled in vowels on a word completion activity. Now, this is not aligned to any 8th grade literacy standards, or in fact, any literacy standards at any grade level. And this is a great example of remediation. So kids in this classroom were receiving 5th grade materials, and they were not able to even try accessing grade level work. And for that reason, they won't be able to catch up to grade level work. Sorry, next slide. Thank you, Margaret. All right, so as a result, what we saw is that students were succeeding by and large on their assignments, right? 71% of the time, they were getting A's and they were getting B's. But when we looked at their work and evaluated it against the standards, they were only mastering the standards about 17% of the time. So while they're doing well on their schoolwork, they're not necessarily completing grade level work or on grade level. But there is something promising in our study. We did see that students who had better grade level assignments made about 1.7 more months of academic progress. And for students who were the furthest behind, they made about 7.3 more months of progress. So this was really promising and clear evidence that we have to give students grade level work. Now let's look at a more recent study. This is a study that was actually done in the 2021 school year during COVID. Tntp partnered with Zern, and Zern is an elementary math curriculum. It's really popular. It's used by about 1 in 4 kids in the United States. So we had a large sample set. And what we found is that students in high poverty schools were more likely to experience remediation in their classrooms rather than low poverty or wealthy classrooms. And this was true despite how ready they were for their grade level instruction. So you can see on this graph, we have students who are experiencing about the same amount of struggle. On the left-hand side, you see 0 to 10 incidents of struggling on an assignment that was reported in Zern. And you see that even though students are struggling the same amount, the students who are in low poverty schools or wealthy schools, the percent chance that they're being remediated as part of their learning is much lower. And for the blue line, the students who are in high poverty schools, though they are performing about the same, are much more likely to be remediated. So this really reaffirmed our findings from the opportunity myth about which students do and don't receive the opportunity to succeed on grade level work. Students in lower income classrooms are more likely to be heavily remediated than their high income counterparts, despite similar levels of readiness. So just stop and think for a second. What are your reactions to learning this information? You can go ahead and pause and jot down notes on your own or just think on your own for a moment. Okay, so in short, there really is strong evidence that learning acceleration works and that it could be key to unwinding generations old academic inequities that the COVID pandemic has only exacerbated. And not only that, our findings reaffirmed what we found in the opportunity myth, that students of color, students from low income backgrounds are less likely to have access to the challenging grade appropriate assignments that they need to catch up. There's also reason for optimism. Learning acceleration really does seem to work, and it's particularly effective for students who are behind. So we won't walk you through the opportunity myth and the Zern study here, but you are welcome to check our website at tntp.org and find those resources if you want to dig deeper into those studies.
So that was just a lot of information that we all just took in. So with that, we're going to take a pause here to reflect on what we've learned so far and all the data and research that we've covered. Please take the next 2 minutes to jot your thinking in your own notes around these 2 questions on the slide. How would you define acceleration and remediation? And how does an acceleration approach support students? You can pause here, and as you're ready, hit play and join us again. We'll see you soon. Welcome back. I hope that was a helpful activity. So schools and classrooms that have been able to break this cycle, as highlighted in the opportunity myth, have embraced a learning acceleration approach, which asserts that every student is capable of accessing grade appropriate work with the right supports, and that regular access to grade appropriate work is actually critical to their academic development. Accelerated learning, however, does not mean rushing through the curriculum or teaching only certain portions of academic standards. In addition to providing grade appropriate work, it requires collecting ongoing data on what students know and are able to do, incorporating scaffolding strategies students need in the context of a school-wide MTSS system, and simultaneously developing a culture of belonging and inclusivity. All of these components come to life within the roadmap. So I would like to land on the point, however, that although remediation is very intuitive, especially as we emerge from COVID, the idea that students miss this, I need to go back and teach it to them. But not only has the research taught us that it's ineffective, it's revealed that unfortunately it does additional harm, something that I know every educator wants to reduce. And so, with that, let's take a look now at where we have been and where we are going in our agenda.
Thank you, Margaret. So next up, we're going to start navigating the roadmap. We're going to take you through the actual physical roadmap to make sure you have a sense of where things are and that you can use it. So what I'd like for you to do one more time, I'm just going to say, go ahead and make sure you have that pulled up on your computer so that you have it ready for when you need it throughout the rest of the session. I'm going to walk you through the key ideas in this document so that you can begin to consider how you'll approach teaching and learning this upcoming school year. Our goal is that by the end of this webinar, you feel prepared to make a plan for the school year in which you're able to bring acceleration alive. And if you're not quite ready, please sign up for office hours. We'd love to see you at office hours. So please also note that acceleration is just going to support bringing your students into grade level instruction and support their well-being. But many of the things we're about to discuss here will be things that you absolutely already do. There'll be things that you've seen done, maybe you've seen a colleague or a leader do them at your school, or there'll be things that you've been meaning to try, but perhaps haven't yet prioritized, which is totally understandable. And so in this planning phase, what we're going to do is help you prioritize what's truly most important for your students in your classroom at your school to make acceleration a reality. Let's discuss the 3 priorities that we focus on in the roadmap. And I always like to say these are all 3 extremely important priorities. They're not in ranked order, and no one of them is skippable. We have to hit all 3 of these priorities. So let's just talk about them in order. Not in order of their importance, but in order of how they are on the slide. First, we prioritize relationships and building a sense of belonging for students and families. And we've seen in the last year that it is both essential and impactful to build partnerships and leverage community to ensure kids have the support that they need. Students feeling socially connected, supported, and respected is actually a condition of academic success. So it's necessary, it's essential. Second, we prioritize understanding what students know and don't yet know. We achieve this by monitoring student understanding now more than ever. In order to accelerate learning and provide just-in-time scaffolds, the educators in their classrooms have to begin every day with a solid understanding of what kids may struggle with in that lesson. And that way they can work to provide access to that day's content. That's how we address all learners through that very strategic support. And the third thing is just prioritizing very strong, grade-appropriate instructions. And this means that we're providing those just-in-time scaffolds and supports. We're not just putting grade level work in front of kids and hoping for the best, right? We're also providing these really strong supports.
There's a tool within the roadmap that really helps bring these priorities to life based on your students in your classrooms. So within the roadmap, there is a self-assessment, which you can see the link to on the slide now. We would like to invite you to complete this self-assessment to the best of your ability at this time. You can pause the recording, and after you complete it, go ahead and rejoin us by hitting play. We hope that completing that self-assessment gave you a more specific vision of everything that this roadmap can offer you and to help guide you through this year. This self-assessment is a great resource to use when you sit down with your coach, a co-teacher, your grade team, even your school leader to help set priorities and goals as you plan ahead for next year. Please take a moment now to reflect on what you learned from completing your self-assessment and identify one goal that you can set for yourself, just one, so that when you go into that meeting, when you start preparing in August for the next school year, you have that goal and that work already done. So go ahead and pause this here, and after you have that goal, please hit play to rejoin.
Thanks for engaging in that reflection. Now that you've had a chance to internalize how you personally may use this roadmap in your classroom, we want to jump back into the structure of the document and help you navigate it. So what you're looking at here is just a snapshot of the 3 priorities we just discussed, as well as the phases of the year. And this roadmap is organized in phases that we see in any normal school year: diagnosing and planning, launching the year, monitoring progress, and then end of year reflection. And although this year is not going to be typical in many ways, we are really not reinventing the wheel here with this. On page 8 of your guide, you will find this broad overview. And these are the key action steps for the school year. It's essential that you use this tool, but you should consider your own context. As we mentioned before, we recognize that teachers may have already had a plan in place for some or even all of these listed action steps. So just keep your own context in mind as you review this. And again, the timeframes in this document are approximate, and they're designed to illustrate when certain key actions may be most effective, but you should also adapt those to fit your context as well.
Now we're going to introduce you to one of my personally favorite tools, the calendar. You can find the downloadable link for a calendar for your very own use. Keep it on your clipboard, keep it on your desktop on page 9 within your roadmap. Now is a great time to hit pause and download that calendar so you have it ready to go on your computer. To walk you through the calendar a little bit more closely, you can find at the top that there are directions for how you might use this tool when thinking about your own teaching. So we invite you to take the next few minutes to actually but to begin populating your calendar, thinking about important key dates that you would like to lock in and make sure you've blocked out that time on your calendar, and also to begin thinking about how you might think about student assessment data, how you might begin to build relationships, right? You can think about these 3 priorities in your own students getting ready for the year ahead. So I invite you now to hit pause, download that calendar on page 9, and rejoin us when that action is complete.
Okay, thanks for engaging with your calendar for the year. And now we've explored the basics of the roadmap, and you've had a chance to interpret it for your own context and calendarize it, I like to say. So what I want to do is direct you to an area of the roadmap that's really a treasure trove of resources, and take a look at Appendix A. Appendix A offers very specific resources, such as examples of how to build a culture of error, specific implementation guides, working protocols, and more. So please take like the next 2 minutes on your own to pause this recording and identify one resource that's going to be useful to you as you embark on this learning acceleration journey this year. So go back to your calendar, think about what you might need, and just peruse the appendix and see what's useful to you. And once you've done that, you can go ahead and unpause us and join us back. All right. Thank you for going ahead and finding those resources. We have arrived at the final portion of our time together, and I'm going to pass it to Margaret for her favorite part of the webinar.
Thanks, Tabitha. If you haven't gathered by now, I have many favorite parts of this webinar, but this is truly one of my favorites. To reiterate what Tabitha shared, thank you so much. If you've made it to the end of this webinar, I tip my hat to you and would like to express my gratitude for engaging with this work with us asynchronously. So the last portion of our time together is going to be a scavenger hunt. And your job is going to be to use the roadmap to identify these 8 components listed on the slide here. Don't worry, there won't be a quiz at the end. We won't check for understanding. The goal of this activity is to really help you navigate the roadmap and understand the multifaceted resources that it can offer you and your students. So we invite you to complete the scavenger hunt now, and we will see you for closing announcements very soon.
Hey, thank you so much for engaging in that scavenger hunt and finding those resources. Our hope is that that really oriented you to all the tools you can use in this document and gave you a chance to explore and become familiar with it so that it's very easy to use and start the school year with. Again, if you have any questions about the document, please sign up for office hours. We'd love to see you there. And before we close out, we'd like to do one final reflection. Given all that you've learned about the value of learning acceleration, the way that the roadmap is structured, and your own personal context by doing that self-assessment, what is one goal that you can set based on learning acceleration and the acceleration roadmap? So go ahead and think about that. And then the second thing is really envisioning your impact. What impact do you anticipate enacting this roadmap will have on your future students for next year? Please pause and go ahead and jot notes on your own, or just think through those two questions.
Thank you so much for engaging in that final reflection. As we mentioned at the beginning of our webinar, this was really just an opportunity to dip our toes in the lake that is the roadmap itself. So if you would like to dive more deeply into any of the topics that we covered today, we would love for you to sign up for one of our professional learning experiences this summer. You can sign up using the roadmap itself. Additionally, if you want some targeted, more small group or one-on-one instruction or conversation, I should say, please join us for office hours where we can answer your targeted and specific questions. So with that, we really hope to see you live together this summer at one of our professional learning experiences. And thank you so, so much for taking the time out of your day to join us for this webinar.
And I'll just echo Margaret and say thank you so much for joining us. If you can join another series, professional learning series, we would love to see you. Can't say that enough. And also, if you have any questions or follow-up, anything you want to say to us, our personal contact information is just up on that slide. So feel free to be in touch. And thank you again. Have a nice day.